Hey everybody, Tony Bacigalupo here, hanging out with John and Martin. It is Monday, October 16th. This is the time we have allocated for show and tell. I don't know if we're going to do any show and tell this week, but we'll see about that. At the very least, we're gonna do a little catching up, and I'll be sharing about Juicy Canada in Vancouver. Martin was just telling me before I started the recording that he met with a couple of people who are sort of in a similar place, building similar spaces in adjacent towns. So, Martin, can you tell us just a little bit more about who these people are and what your experience has been so far?
Um, okay, well, I'm not quite sure how much of what they shared with me I'm allowed to share with the wider community, but because these spaces, like my own, they're all at the planning stage. So there was one in Leicester, which is a reasonably large city, and one in Hitchin, which is a town a bit smaller than where I am, Luton. And it's totally disappeared.
Yeah,
What's that?
there he is.
Sorry, I'm cutting out here. I got you though. I'm hearing you.
So, well, we're just in touch. So it's useful to have people in a similar situation to bounce ideas off. Yeah, just beginning our conversation. So I don't haven't learned a great deal yet, but just exploring and seeing how we can help each other, perhaps, and exchange ideas.
Cool. All right. Very good. And John, what's the latest on your end? What's the timeline looking like now?
Well, finally, after almost a year of negotiating the lease, we got that signed on Friday, which was a big hurdle.
Whoa,
And
whoa! You signed the lease.
signed the lease.
Congratulations.
So now I'm committed for 10 years at least.
Oh, that's
Yeah, that was a big hurdle. And we are now in the process of, I had already committed to starting construction and engineering plans. So that was one of the reasons why I had to get this lease signed, already expending money. But we got a tentative date of November 1st for our plan submittal. And then it's probably 3 to 4 weeks for permitting and approval. So we want to get started, before the first of the year, at least get construction started. And we're still probably looking right now, probably April, might be pushed back to May just because of some of the delays we encountered. But, first things first, got that lease signed, and now we're moving forward.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks.
How have you celebrated this?
I don't remember. I went out Friday night, and Saturday I felt like I could have used a little more sleep.
All right, yeah.
I went golfing yesterday. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to internalize the value of the experience that you're having now, because it's important to nourish you as you go on this journey,
Thank you. I will.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for you. This is a big step. I know it's been a long time coming. I mean, we've been working together, probably about 6 months now, and
Right.
just getting to this point is a big deal. So I'm happy for you.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Good. So what needs to happen next? Kind of what are the new questions and things that are coming up?
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like this group, because there's it's sort of like I want to focus in while I've got my architect working on the plans and engineering drawings. I want to focus more in on the logistics of the business, and really I'm sort of concentrating on the amenities right now, what different amenities are being offered at different facilities and how that's working. So sort of just going through of what we're going to look at offering and try to get some feedback from some of the other operators. I think I asked a couple of weeks ago about maybe it was mailboxes and how that was being handled. Obviously, I've learned that there's virtual mail services that are being offered that looks like a separate potential profit center that we might also be willing to, probably going to offer. Just like coffee service, beer, some of those. IT is another big one that I'm not an IT guy, so I've got a partner that is, but trying to figure out all of that and what needs to be offered and what others are currently offering within their facilities.
Nice. Yeah. So there's a lot of different directions you could go there, a lot of questions and different things you could do. So I guess I'm curious how you even narrow down deciding from all the different things. How are you tackling it? Like how are you project managing that?
Oh, that's sort of been my background. I've opened similar businesses, so it's sort of like a checklist of just organizing what needs to be done. It's not too much different from my construction schedule, putting out dates and what needs to be accomplished. So I think that construction completed. So I've been focusing more on the architecture and engineering. And now that we're sort of got that underway, now I can start really working on the logistics of the business.
Got it. Cool. I like it. Great. Well, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for both of you guys. Martin, are you planning on going to Co-working Europe conference in Dublin?
No, I'm not. I'm not quite ready to make that level of investment. I decided. I did seriously consider going.
Okay. Well, I'm waiting to confirm if I am in fact going to be spending some time in Newcastle. I know that that's not particularly close, but not particularly far. So I'm wondering if it would make sense for us to try to meet up. It probably wouldn't, but I'm keeping it in mind, the fact that I'll be, several thousand miles closer to you. So,
right. Yes.
If the right opportunity comes up, if maybe somebody, if I end up tagging along for a trip down south, then I'll definitely look you up.
Cool.
I found that in these European conferences, John, this is an interesting thing. I don't know if you've been to any European conferences, but you go there and you say, okay, I'm going to spend 5 days in Paris. And I'm going to go to this conference, and then you meet these awesome people, and then these awesome people are like, oh, hop on a flight and come to Berlin with us. And then before you know it, if you're not careful, you could end up just accidentally backpacking around Europe. So, and I know that there's several UK area people going to this conference, so I wouldn't be surprised if you found yourself tempted.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anyway, cool. So why don't I tell you guys a little bit about my experience in Canada and just kind of a little bit about what I took away from it, and see what that stirs up for us as far as conversation. First of all, so the conference took place in Vancouver, which is a really interesting city. It's a city that's it's a shipping city. So, big harbor, a lot of stuff coming through from China and from Asia. And so you've got a lot of money in Vancouver that comes from kind of the shipping industry people. You have a lot of Chinese money and a lot of like big condo towers and things like that. So from an urban perspective, there's a lot of interesting dynamics around that. But then on kind of the other end of the spectrum, for whatever reason, Vancouver, like certain parts of Vancouver, have become this kind of catch-all ground for people who are displaced, who are ill, who are addicted to drugs, or just like kind of not finding their real belonging and place in the world. And so you've got this wild experience of people kind of living on the streets or living in these situations in there. And they've actually kind of created a society amongst themselves right on the streets of Vancouver. And so this culture is kind of, there's this like really interesting dynamic going on in Vancouver around these different people from different roots. And there's the indigenous population of the region. And so, all of North America has indigenous populations that were displaced by European settlers. And, in the United States, we kind of, acknowledge it, but only kind of, sort of. Whereas in Vancouver in particular, it's really a big part of the culture. The people who are part of the indigenous population are there, they're visible. When you start a conference, like when we started this conference, there was an acknowledgement that we're on the unceded lands of the tribes. And there was actually a ceremony led by someone from one of the indigenous tribes. And so we did this like whole interactive exercise where we pretended to be animals, and we went around and sang and moved around a lot, which I thought was just super cool. And something we totally wouldn't have been able to get away with, I think, at the US conference, but it worked out well for this conference. But what I think it brought up for me was this real sense of place. The conference took place at this building, this 312 Main project, which is what I was starting to mention to John earlier, this 105,000 square foot police station, former police station, right on the edge, where if you walk one block that way, you're in, gentrified, hipster, awesome bar, restaurant, whatever. You walk one block this way, and, it's people shooting up on the streets. And so it's really at this crazy intersection, and trying to make this kind of space that can be embedded in the city and in the community. And so there was a real sense of place, that this wasn't just a conference venue. This was a place where there's going to be a lot of controversy, where there's going to be a lot of hopefully healing, a lot of business growth, things like that. And you could feel it. You could feel it in the event. It was still a construction site, actually. So they made the space available for a conference as it was being constructed. So they actually built out walls and finished the bathrooms, and so you'd go into a functional bathroom, but all the wood was unpainted, just kind of hacked together for the conference, which really gave it a raw sense that you were in the middle of something that was getting started. And so the venue itself being this vehicle for, we want to not be a gentrifying force, but we also want to, support the businesses that come in, but we also want to have this space that's kind of open and available to even the people who are on the street, who can come in, go to the bathroom, get Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. You really got the strong sense that there was a role that this space can play in the local community, which I think to some degree is going to be true for both of your projects, Martin. I think especially for yours, because of the scale and because of the nature of your space that you're going to have. But one of the things immediately just became apparent was how the places that we're building are really more than just workspaces. They really are a part of the community. They're a part of the city that they're in, and that they can play a role in facilitating the development of the culture of that city. And I think the more sensitive you are to that, and the more aware you are of the role that space can play and the other people who might be involved, I think the better the project's going to end up being for everybody. I really think that co-working space itself, if we just take the basic co-working space thing, it's a functional thing. It's not that different from the serviced office world that, has preceded co-working for a long time. And there's a place for it. But I think if you look at the social phenomenon, like why the word co-working is a big deal, why all of this has been blowing up the last 10 years, you're really looking at it changing the fabric of society, that, the way people work is changing, the way people gather is changing, the way people use spaces is changing. The fact that we have laptops and Wi-Fi and we can work anywhere is a pretty radical thing, and we're still only just starting to get the hang of it. And so, thinking about how that fits into the fabric of society in general, I think is an important part of why what we're doing is a little bit more than just a serviced office space. And so in order to do that, in order to do something that's more than just a serviced office space, I think, there need to be conversations that are happening, maybe going out, hanging out at city council meetings, hanging out at meetup groups, spending some time with some of the local neighborhood associations, even the library. There's a lot of interesting activities, a lot of energies you can tap into that, if you find the right people, again, kind of comes back to finding the right handful of people that are really going to play a critical role in making your project special and attracting members, things like that. And so if you're kind of using that awareness, I think you can find some really interesting people who are passionate about making the city a better place, recruit their participation in what you're doing, get them involved in the project, even if it's informally, even if they say your project sucks and you're gentrifying the neighborhood and they don't like you, awesome. That's really great. Like, let's have a dialogue about that, learn more about it, which is what Ashley was doing in 312. She was doing a lot of listening to people who, when she came into the project, Ashley's the executive director of this giant project. Before she came into it, it was bungled. It was brought in as this like technology center, and it was going to be this huge gentrifying force, and people hated it. There were like hundreds of groups that publicly stated they were going to protest the project. And so she went in and said, "Hey, I'm the new person in charge. What's your beef? Tell me what's going on, and let's work on this together." So, having those dialogues, I think makes a huge difference. So that's, man, I just got to the beginning of the conference. We didn't get to the conference itself, but how am I doing so far? How's this bouncing off for you guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
So I'm glad it's interesting. If I fail to be interesting at any point, just tell me to move on, because I can rant about this stuff. What were you going to say,
Tony? One of the key points that you brought up was being a part of your community, your neighborhood, and that's something I've already joined in with a neighborhood group. It's called, Charlotte has all these different suburbs or neighborhoods, and a lot of them have merchant associations or community groups. There's NoDa, North Davidson Street, there's South End, there's Dilworth, there's et cetera, et cetera. But there's the area that I'm going into is branded themselves as Montfort Park, and that they're bringing both residents in. There's a lot of apartment dwellers, a lot of young millennials, and just self-employed people, entrepreneurs, and also there's a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants, bars, which is awesome, bowling alley, a lot of entertainment in the area. So they've created this new community group, community association, and I've gotten real involved in that and helping them now, because then for Christmas it's going to offer all the businesses will be offering discounts to residents in the area and other business office dwellers. And even though I'm not going to be open, I want to be a part of that, because they're looking at doing these on a quarterly basis. And once I am open, I'll have a real involvement for my members to be able to participate in all the neighborhood events. So I think you're right on with just getting involved in your local community, which is something for independent like us. We're able to do that. That's hard for a WeWork. I mean, they'll have events at their own facility, but or they might sponsor something. But to actually get out into the local community and go to meetings and bring people together, that's a little harder for a company of that size to pull off.
Yeah, I agree, John. I think they're going to be able to have different scales. WeWork's going to be able to do a corporate deal, like with Airbnb. They did a deal with Airbnb, so they're going to be able to have the scale to be able to do things like that. But to zig where they zag, right? These are the kinds of things where they're not going to be showing up to the community meetings and involving people in that way. At least probably not for the most part. So, yeah, that's awesome. I love that you're doing it. And I think part of what I want to do, I want to create some more planning materials for people starting new spaces. And one of the things I did for the team that I trained in Vancouver was really work with them to kind of create the space to identify key people to engage in various capacities. Now I'm taking it a step further to say, okay, what are some community leaders that you can have relationships with, maybe even city officials, other prospective sponsors, partners, things like that. And then, if you can just identify a handful of people in each category that you're keeping in touch with, I think it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Tony, did you say that project's 100,000 square feet?
105.
And it's all co-working?
It's mostly, I mean, so what they're doing is it's going to be basement artist space. Ground floor is going to be kind of public event space, cafe, and some conference rooms. Second floor is pretty much co-working and like small private offices. And then third floor, I think, is going to be like more small private offices. And then the rest of it, I think it's 3 more floors, is going to be more leased tenants.
Okay.
So it's definitely kind of a multi-purpose ecosystem type thing. Mm-hmm. But even the leased tenants are going to be treated as members of the ecosystem. So you've got a very interesting multi-community dynamic where everybody identifies as part of the 312 main community, but then you have your sub-communities within, basically whatever floor you're on as well.
Cool.
Yeah, good stuff. So doing some planning around that, I think, is a big deal. Just finding the various contacts in those various categories. So I'm definitely going to play with that a little bit. And then let's see the rest of the conference. This conference was definitely there was a lot of emotion in it. It was very kind of personal. We did touch on a lot of the basic business stuff, especially during the unconference. But there was a lot of personal, emotional stuff. We talked about mental health and wellness. There were a number of suicides in a couple of the communities that were represented in the co-working conference, and so there were some conversations about that. An initiative started around galvanizing community members to check in on each other, things like that. We talked about the emotional load of doing these things, and there were definitely a lot of people who've taken on a lot, and staying in that vein, how to deal with that guy. So this is a big topic. There's every community of any size. There's always at least one person who just drives you crazy, and so there was a very kind of deep dive into commiserating and just kind of working on how to deal with that, which is still, I think, an open topic. It's something I've talked about a bit, I've written about it a bit, but I can't say that I can give someone a decisive answer for what to do about it. But at the very least, we can acknowledge it and we could try to work with it. I think with anything that is going to be hard, at the very least you can acknowledge it, and you can work to just be aware of it and have that not drive you as crazy as it could. So that was good. And then, from my perspective, one of the things I talked about was just I got to upload the video of my talk. I don't know if Juicy's okay with me posting my video publicly, but I can sure post it privately so you guys can see my talk. But I talked a lot about how to attract and retain members, and specifically focusing on making it an invitation to participate in something as opposed to just renting space, which is something you've both heard me talk about extensively. But I think we can go a lot further with it. I think that there's more ground to be covered. And actually, one of the things I got to do in the employee training that I was excited about was really pitch my vision of a seasonal-based co-working management structure. So the idea is, stop me, have I explained this extensively to either of you yet? I may have touched on it.
I don't think so. No.
Awesome. So the idea with this is that there are natural rhythms to when people join and leave co-working spaces. Here in the States, it's pretty straightforward. August is an apocalyptic month. People travel, they go on vacation, they move, whatever. And then in September and October, people move back into town, get new jobs, they come back from vacation. So you see a lot of people go away in August, you see new people come in September. And then the same thing happens December to January, holiday, and then back to work. And so designing for those rhythms is advantageous to you. If you're going to put effort into recruiting members, optimize for the beginning of September, optimize for beginning of January. They're the best times of year to recruit. And also, design August and December to be times to create opportunities for graceful exit, recap, review, clean up the space. Those are good times to kind of maybe refocus and maybe change up the strategy. Beginning of August, you could set up your strategy for your September recruiting and have that up and running, mid-August, so that when people are researching, hey, I'm going to move to your city in September because whatever reason, right? They'll have your stuff ready. So that's the beginning framework. And then you probably could do like a spring seasonal thing too. So you could do this 3 or 4 times a year. You could go by quarter or you could go by season, whatever. But you create these rhythms. You say, okay, I know I'm going to be recruiting people here. I know people are kind of going to be bailing here. So let's design for this. And then you say, okay, we're going to create opportunities in the beginning to get people engaged. So I'm not just recruiting people to come work in my space because that's a commodity thing that everybody else is doing. I want people to come to my program or the program that someone else is running in my space. And I want those to be coordinated. They all kick off first 2 weeks of September. And maybe that way you have an opportunity for an interest meeting. You can say, hey, all these things are going to be happening over the course of the fall. And we're going to have one evening where everybody who's leading something is going to get together. We can all learn about all the things, exactly like you have in university, where there's a day, the first week of college, where all of the clubs at the university all have a table, and you can go and there's student radio and there's student television and there's the volleyball club and whatever. And you go down the table and you pick up all the slips and you decide which clubs you want to join for the semester. And that lines up with, me as a student. I'm coming in and I'm what are my interests? What are my goals for this coming semester? Well, yeah, I want to play volleyball. I want to get in better shape. I want to, try out television, whatever it is. And now my interests are aligned with other people who share those same interests for a finite, specific period of time. Now I have a really good chance of being engaged with this community for that chunk of time, 3 months or so. And then at the end of it, I have something to aim for. So now we're kind of going towards something. Maybe at the end, depending on what group you're in, maybe there's a demo day, maybe there's, whatever, there's a play, there's, the culmination, and then there's another opportunity for a party. In the fall thing, obviously, it's a holiday party. So now you've got a holiday party, maybe there's presentations, whatever. We bring that to a close, and we say, this is great, this is complete. If you want to change groups, if you want to make new groups, if you want to stop organizing your group, now's the time to do it. If something failed, if someone tried to organize something and then they left or they just fell off, this is the ending. That's no more. It's done. And then, by the way, January, we're going to do this again. So if you want to organize something new, great. If you want to keep doing the exact same thing you were doing before, awesome. You're recommitted January to April, right? And now January, you start the whole process over again. So the reason that this is awesome is there are several reasons. It gives you a way to concentrate your marketing and your recruiting efforts, for one. It gives members a way to stay continually engaged in a co-working space. One of the things that happens when you don't do this, someone joins September 1st. By the time you get to March, they've been there 6 months, and what's getting them excited to come in every day? It's really a matter of how well they've been able to kind of get to know people, how well you've been able to engage them. But all things being equal, a lot of times by that point, the person's probably pretty disengaged. There's maybe a little bit of a rut or a little bit of a malaise. So what you're doing instead is saying, I'm going to give you a reason to be really excited to be here in the fall. And then I'm going to give you another reason to be excited to be here in January. Maybe it's the same reason, but your life is changing. Right? I joined a co-working space in September. I'm focused on certain stuff. When I'm still in that co-working space in January, my focus has shifted. If you can align your space's activities with where that person's focus shifts to, then suddenly now they're psyched again. And now you've got another 3 months of that person being engaged. And a ton of other benefits as well. So there's a lot of ways you can approach this. In my mind, I think the most basic thing to do is to create on your calendar interest meetings. September 15th, January 15th, April 15th, or, whatever that schedule is. And I've got some documents that are designed for this. And then celebrations at the end of those cycles. And then take the existing efforts you're already doing for programming, the existing people you're already talking to, and fit it into that. So you're not doing a hell of a lot of work you're not already doing. You're basically just organizing the work you're already doing in a more cohesive and coherent way. Oh, and by the way, this makes it really easy to have sponsors too. All right, I've been ranting a long time. How's this sounding for you so far?
Good. Go on. I'm curious to hear what you're going to say about sponsorship.
Yeah, okay. So let's say that we've got this program going. It's going to be, this membership push. And now, as a result of this, a fair bit of educational programming gets kind of funneled into this. So if you're already thinking of doing some programming, now you've got a programming schedule that can really kind of be adapted to it. So you can, talk to other meetup organizers or educators who are, already people that you want to be talking to. Now you can say, okay, if you want to work with me, awesome. Let me know. Let's get you on the schedule for the fall. So that means, if it's going to be once a week, once a month, whatever that program partner's schedule is, you say, all right, let's book the whole fall. So you would say, okay, you're the Charlotte WordPress meetup, and you're going to do an event once a month on the third Tuesday of the month. So that means it's September 27th, October 16th, November 25th, and, December 18th, whatever it is. Awesome. I've got 4 meetups. They're booked. This is a conversation you're having in like July, right? Or August. So then you say, okay, we've got the 4 months booked. And we know, based on this person's experience, they attract 50 to 75 WordPress developers every event. Now, multiply that by 5 or 10. You say we've got proven programs, people who are going to be coming to those programs, and this is it. It's booked out for the fall. That's inventory for a potential sponsor. So you can say we've got 10 events a month, and there's going to be 4 months. It's 40 events. It's going to attract an average of 50 people. That's 2,000 people through your doors. That's just in the physical space. That's whatever it is. It's 50x in terms of online reach. So you can package that together very easily when it's a finite group. And then it's very easy to say to a sponsor, hey, this is what we're going to do every 3 months, every three months for the next, few years. Would you, let's get you started. Why don't we do at least the first round and see what you feel about it? And then if you like it, let's talk about doing a multi-year arrangement. You get to sponsor and subsidize local community programming with people who are in your target market. And if we don't already have people in your target market, tell us who it is and we'll go find them. So it gives you just a nice package to kind of to work with on that.
Are you being compensated by the sponsors?
Yeah. So the package, and we talked about this a few months back. So the way that the package works is that, and you could do this a few different ways, but you donate the event space to the organizer. And in exchange, the organizer agrees to a fair number of conditions. The sponsor gets listed on their meetup page. They're mentioned in every email that goes out. And it could just be a little thing at the bottom, whatever. They're thanked at the beginning of the event. Maybe there's some signage or some materials at the event so that if anyone's interested, they can get it. And maybe there's something else. Maybe there's just a chance to do like a survey or whatever it is. So there's like a package of concessions. And for the meetup organizers never want to pay for a venue. And so they usually can get a free venue, but it's usually kind of hit or miss. They realize that they're kind of second-class citizens when you're a meetup organizer. You're not paying, so you're just kind of relying on the good graces of someone to give you their space, which means maybe that space goes away with no notice, or maybe that isn't the ideal situation, especially when you're dealing with substantial AV needs and food and beverage needs. If you're a serious meetup organizer who's been doing this a while, you really want to get that stuff locked down. So while I probably could go and get some free space, if I could be a part of a program and there's going to be some support system around it, maybe some additional publicity, and I know I can count on that space and have a professional thing, and it's underwritten by a company, awesome. And I don't even have to do the negotiations, terrific, right? I just apply for the thing, and then the co-working space takes care of finding the sponsors. So yeah, that's the arrangement.
It's good.
Thanks. It worked well for me. Yeah, we did it well. And so just fitting that within this construct works really well too. You could probably just have sponsors, kind of more general sponsors for the various other programming that goes on in your space as well. But I think that depends a lot more on who you're talking to and what their goals are. Yeah, so seasonal programming. So what I have is a few pieces of this puzzle, and I'm hoping that with the Vancouver project, I get to really go a little bit further with working with the team to develop this. But what you can do is, and if any of you wants to work with me on this specifically, at some point in your development, I would love to kind of case study this a little bit. But we can set up the basic interest meeting event, which I think is the main thing you have to get right. If you just get the interest meeting going, get people to show up, get a few things to kind of stir up out of it, then everything else can kind of take care of itself from there. And then some specific programs that I could have, kind of in my pocket that, that I would have a member of your staff maybe lead to kind of set the foundation. And for that, Codivation is my favorite, which I think you're both familiar with. So, and again, all the materials are in the folder. So, yeah, highly recommend it. And I would say, there's nothing stopping you from starting these rhythms now, even with a small group. As you're building your list of people that you're in touch with, creating some rhythm of meeting with them on a regular basis, having these conversations. Once you feel comfortable, or someone that you hire or someone you bring onto your team feels comfortable doing some more outbound community building, no reason you can't start these kinds of things before the space opens. The community exists independent of the space. People can be a part of your online discussion group. They can go through that process of signing up and being members, and you could have that be a free level, or you could have it where anyone who puts down even a nominal deposit on membership gets to be a member, and it's free of charge until the space opens. There's a lot of ways you can play it. But if you can start doing some of those rhythms before the space opens, you're going to give yourself a huge advantage, so that, once the space does open, you've got people who already know and trust each other. You've got some momentum built up. You've worked out some kinks, and so I would highly recommend that. I'm thinking, John, in terms of your timeline, maybe in January, that be a more deliberate thing that we be designing for. Maybe this fall is way more kind of informal, conversations among people who are interested, hanging out, having drinks, you continuing to go to other people's events, things like that. But then maybe formalizing some more. Do you have a name for your space yet, for your community?
Cocotiv.
Cocotiv. That's right. Cocotiv. Yes, I remember because we were talking about your tagline. Cocotiv, right? So maybe the Cocotiv community becomes more of a visceral, real thing. Leading up to January, where there's some sense of the Cocotiv community exists. We're gathering in this location, whatever the location is, and we have an interest meeting. Come learn about what it means to be part of the Cocotiv community on January 15th, right? And yeah.
I'm one step ahead of you.
Oh, yes. I like it. Talk to me.
I talked to the founder of this Charlotte meetup called Charlotte Solopreneurs, and I may have mentioned he's got, I think, 1,400 members in his group, and anywhere from 20 to 40 people show up at a beer pub in another part of town, and they've been hosting these. So I asked him, I said, has anyone signed up for November? And he said, no. I said, well, can I host it over at Brawley's, which is a great outdoor beer garden right across the street from our building. So you look across the street and you see the building under construction. And I said, I'll take it one step. I'll buy everyone their first beer. He's like, oh, wow, you'll get a good turnout for that. So he's already got it on his agenda. And I saw he's already got like 15 people signed up. I thought that's pretty good because normally people don't start signing up until about the week before. So what I'm wanting to do is launch a website, a very preliminary website, sort of coming next year, with just some of the basics. So I've got a website designer trying to get that finished before our get together in November. So we have some things. My architects, I've got renderings of what the space is going to look like. So, and then I've working with the local newspaper. They want to do an article, and I just said I got to get a little further along, but I probably would launch that or have that article come out about the same time as this event. So
absolutely, yeah. And then you catch the people who, if it comes out on Monday and the event's on Tuesday, the people will be like, oh, I just saw this in the paper. Yeah. Heck yeah. I love it. And I love that you've got a partner who is already an embedded community organizer, It's great.
Well, the other nice thing is the guy that I used to buy, this was before, microbreweries ever existed. There's a guy that used to sell all the kegs in town to anyone having a party. So I had a number of parties. So I've known this guy for years, and I told him what we were doing. He's like very excited to know that he might have 150, 200 members across the street from him. So I said, would you be willing to supply the beer to our facility? He's like, oh, absolutely. It's like, so he's going to be my beer sponsor, and he represents a lot of different breweries throughout the state. So it's a good, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great topic is finding those partners to line up. I got to start writing some of this down. Okay, finding partners to line up, because there's so many things that get made so much easier once you make friends. And the beer sponsor is a perfect example. You go befriend a few different breweries, which is honestly a pretty fun thing to do on its own, right? But then what you end up doing is now you've got free beer or discounted beer, and all you have to do is throw their logo on the event page and thank them or put their little card on top of the keg, And to the beer company, it's a great deal. It's terrific. I had the same thing in New York. We had Brooklyn Brewery, and it was basically, I forget what the arrangement was, but we basically just emailed them and we, just say how many cases we wanted, and we just had to take care of the transport. So I had to rent a van or something, go grab the cases and come back. But I mean, free beer.
That's good beer. I've had that, the Brooklyn Brewery.
Yeah, it's good beer. And so I went to their brewery in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn, and went right to their factory, and literally there'd be someone there. He said, "Oh, Newark City. Okay, here you go."
Absolutely.
So this is another thing we're going to put into the strategy thing that I'm playing with now, is like building your. I'm visualizing like little dots in a circle, and each one is a people. So there's like community leaders, government leaders, neighborhood leaders, whatever. But then there's like the beer person. Maybe there's local food vendors. Yeah, local food vendors, absolutely. So service providers, this is huge. Legal, accounting, and technical IT stuff. So when you know what, I don't tell the story enough. When we got started, I didn't know a damn thing about anything, right? And, I had a sublease of this space that this startup had too much room in, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I had an amazing network because I was attending all these meetups. I was organizing meetup groups in cafes. That was my original co-working organizing experience. And so I had an amazing friend who was a startup lawyer, and he donated, thousands of dollars worth of his services pro bono, helping us draw up legal agreements and, consulting me on how to approach certain things. And he was happy to do it. And guess what? When people who were founding startups in my community asked me if I knew a lawyer, of course I sent them him. So, it was very symbiotic. We had IT guys who were amazing. They had like a local hosting company, but they did like little ISP, like partnership services in the city. They wired our whole space for Ethernet, and they donated hardware. Well, I guess I forget if they donated it or if they loaned it to us. They had extra hardware that they weren't using, you know, $1,000 switch, which is like some enterprise grade thing that they had sitting in their office. They said, sure, you know, use it. If we need it back, we'll let you know, but you know, you take it. And, you know, they put their sticker on it. So again, when some of our members graduated out and needed to, you know, wire up their own office space, those were the first guys I called. So, you know, finding even just a handful of those partners can make the difference between you spending a lot of money on something and you saving a lot of money on something and having this added social capital, because that story makes it so much more compelling for a member, for the newspaper or whatever, to be able to say, oh yeah, you know, our beer is sponsored by the local brewery. Our food is sponsored by the local food producer. Our legal services are donated by this local lawyer. Our IT services are, even if it's subsidized, you know, a lot of these people give you a coupon if you're nice to them, right?
Sure.
So, you know, even if you're paying something, but they, you know, they throw in some extra freebies or whatever, creating that story is just so compelling, because now also that comes back at you. These people, you know, the startup lawyer deals with startups. He's going to refer people to you. The local IT firm is going to deal with small businesses. They're going to refer people to you. So you're creating this really amazing little neighborhood, little community, you know, of supporters and friends. And the more you learn to kind of lean on that, the more it really it just emerges where all the opportunities come from.
That's a great story. One of my partners is actually an attorney. The other one is architect / GC, who's going to be was doing the architectural drawings and the construction. And the third one's an IT guy. So I went out to sort of offer their services as part of the equity that I gave them in the company. So that's worked out well. But you mentioned the attorney. His son, he's brought on, is really specializes in estate planning. Well, he wants to put his son in space at least one day a week and offer, you know, just estate planning, you know, especially with young millennials or entrepreneurs. That's the last thing they really are thinking about long term, but smart idea on his part to be able to, you know, have that access to potential clients without having to go out and really pay for them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, to be visible like that, to be available, you know, and even if the people that person meets in the community themselves aren't ideal prospective clients, they're all people who know this person now.
Sure.
So just the awareness. I mean, a lot of times this business gets done through family members or mutual contacts or whatever. So that's terrific. And you can also see, so John, this is interesting. This is where I want to take this seasonal model. Is that guy with the estate planning thing, you know, he could be doing one little workshop, talk, whatever, per quarter.
Right, right.
And, you know, once you start layering that together, you can start to see, you know, okay, maybe we have a consistent, you know, financial planning or life planning rhythm that happens, you know, one Thursday a month or whatever, you know, the fourth Thursday of the month or whatever it is, where, you know, okay, the first Thursday of the month in this season cycle, we have a tax planner. The second Thursday of the month in the season cycle, we have the estate planner, whatever. But now you can go to this guy and say, hey, look, I got you for 4 dates for 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Really easy to fill it in because, you know, it's the second, fourth Thursday of each season. And you can put that on the calendar right now and say, can I have you at 10 a.m. on these 4 Thursdays? Right? As opposed to like all of the shit that we had to do when we were doing ours, where every event was this like grind of trying to find the right person and book the time and figure out when to do it. Like, no, you can have these programs really planned out and make it really easy for someone to just say yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I dig it. I like where we're going with this. How do you think it would be best for us to work on this stuff together? Because we have these calls, and I realize everyone's kind of going on their own thing, but I feel like it would be nice for us, maybe even if we're all kind of doing different things, we do have the seasons, so we can follow the seasons ourselves to say, you know, let's let's plan together what we're going to do as our strategy for January, and then, you know, coordinate on that. So maybe it's opt-in, maybe it's only 5 of us or whatever it is, but, you know, if you want to opt in to working together to plan your seasonal strategy for January, you can join that. Maybe that's a separate video call.
I think you seem to get a good response when someone puts out a question to the group. You know, you have others that chime in and say, well, here's what we did, or here's what we did. And maybe it's just a question of, you know, what challenges are you facing with your scheduling? You know, we'd like to put together, you know, a charrette or whatever, and walk through this, have a year planning session.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking maybe it works better as a one-off invitation to start, maybe?
Well, I think not, but what you might find is it will give you more material to work with. If, you know, what my challenges are, what I'm looking at is going to be different than Martin's, and, you know, that's going to be different than Marion, who is sending out, you know, emails this morning. So, you know, but I think I love, whether I'm looking at it or not, learning about challenges that others are having, because ultimately I'm going to probably face the same thing once I'm open.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right. I'll noodle on that a little bit. I like the idea of doing something. And I'm also thinking about outbound stuff that I could do to attract new prospective members. So if I could say, you know, hey, we're working on doing something, and, you know, kind of, you know, eating my own dog food, saying it's going to be a seasonal, seasonal planning for seasonal planning, you know. Of course, our schedule goes a little ahead. So, you know, we'd have to do it so that, you know, everyone can execute in time for their people.
Right.
So that might require a little bit of
obviously. The people in the southern hemisphere have a different schedule.
That's true. I don't
know if we have any of those.
You know, what I'm thinking is that but I think if I can get this big enough to the point where that becomes a real issue, then we can appoint a Southern Hemisphere coordinator for the for that side of it. Or I could just run a separate call for it, which is fine.
Sure.
Cool. This is exciting. I feel like we got some stuff to play with. What are any other thoughts? Any other kind of things that are specific or live for you guys right now?
Don't worry, we'll contact you if we have something.
Indeed, I'm sure you will. Cool, guys. If you guys are feeling good, I think I'm gonna jump off and kind of try to pick up on some of this momentum and use that to maybe create some new schemes or some new resources for us.
It was helpful you put out the calendar again. You know what? I think I missed the last call, and I spaced that out. I had something going on, but it helps seeing what's coming up, especially the new organizers. That always has seemed to get a pretty good response from your people. So just nice to keep seeing that calendar reappear.
Yeah, I'll be keeping up with that, and now that I'm not in Vancouver anymore, that'll be a little bit easier too. So yeah, I'll be planning on sending that out every week.
Good.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Tony.
All right, guys. It was a pleasure. Keep being awesome. Hit me up if you need.
Bye now.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.